The letter she found changed her forever. Have you ever come across something unexpected, something small, like a photo or a note, that suddenly made you stop in your tracks and rethink everything? Maybe it was an old picture tucked inside a book, or a birthday card you forgot you kept. Moments like that have a strange power, don't they? They tug at your heart, stir up memories, and sometimes they change the course of your life. That's exactly what happened to Margaret. Now, Margaret wasn't looking for anything that day. In fact, she was doing something we all put off, cleaning out that one drawer in the kitchen where rubber bands, expired coupons, and mystery keys go to live. You know the one, right? She laughed as she sorted through old pens and takeout menus, but then, nestled between a faded recipe card and a paperclip, she found a yellowed envelope. No stamp, no address, just her name written in careful handwriting she hadn't seen in years. She almost tossed it aside. Almost. But curiosity got the better of her. And when she opened it, everything changed. We'll get to what the letter said in just a moment. But let me ask you something first. Have you ever felt like you were drifting through the days, doing the same things, seeing the same people, feeling like maybe your best years were behind you? If so, you're not alone. And I promise, this story and what came from that letter is going to remind you that it's never too late for a second act, a new chapter, or even a total transformation. Margaret was in her late 60s. She had done all the things she thought she was supposed to do: raise a family, keep a home, show up for everyone. But somewhere along the way, she stopped showing up for herself. Sound familiar? That letter, it was from her younger self, a version of her who, decades ago, wrote down all the dreams she had, the places she wanted to go, the kind of life she hoped to live. She had written it during a summer break, after college, when she was full of ideas and absolutely certain that the world had something amazing in store for her. Reading it now, so many years later, was like being shaken awake. The words weren't complicated. In fact, they were simple, but they were honest, and they reminded Margaret of who she was before the routines, before the responsibilities, before the quiet settling of her own needs in the background. I want to live near the water someday, the letter said. I want to write a book. I want to learn Italian. I want to grow old laughing, not regretting. Margaret sat at her kitchen table for hours that day. The letter never left her hand. And here's the thing, she could have just folded it up and put it back where she found it. She could have smiled at the memory, sighed, and gone right back to sorting through the junk drawer. But she didn't. That letter sparked something. It reminded her that dreams don't have expiration dates, and it made her ask herself a question that's simple but powerful. If not now, when? That one question turned into a list, not a bucket list filled with wild, expensive goals, but a list of things she could start doing right now to bring more meaning, more joy, more purpose into her life. Things that lit her up inside, things she had forgotten she even wanted. So, what did Margaret do next? She started small. She bought a little notebook and began writing in it every morning. Just a few lines, her thoughts, a memory, sometimes a simple poem. She hadn't written anything in years, but it felt good to just begin. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. Then she signed up for a beginner's Italian class at the local community center. She felt nervous walking into that room, surrounded by strangers, stumbling over simple words. But guess what? She laughed more in those classes than she had in a long time. She even made a new friend, Anna, who had also just retired and was looking for something more in her days. See, the beauty of waking up to your life again isn't in the grand gestures. It's in the small, intentional steps that make you feel alive. Margaret's days started to feel different, brighter, not because everything changed overnight, but because she did, one tiny step at a time. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've forgotten what lights you up. Maybe you're waiting for a sign or for someone to give you permission to start dreaming again. Let this be that sign. Let this story be that gentle nudge. You don't need to find a letter from your younger self to begin. But if you could write one today, if you could speak to the you from decades ago, what would you say? Would you say, I did everything I wanted? Or would you say, I wish I had tried? Margaret didn't wait for the perfect moment. She made the moment perfect by choosing to act. And now, maybe it's your turn. Margaret never expected a dusty old envelope to turn her life around, but sometimes all it takes is a whisper from the past to shake us awake. After those first brave steps, writing in her notebook, joining that Italian class, she started feeling something she hadn't felt in years: momentum. It wasn't just about crossing things off a list anymore. It was about rediscovering herself. You know, it's funny how easy it is to become a stranger to your own joy. Life gets so full of doing what we have to do that we forget what we want to do. But the spark doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under calendars, chores, and concerns about everyone else. Margaret's mornings began to feel lighter. She still made her tea the same way, still looked out at the same view from her kitchen window. But now, there was a little more color in it all. She had a reason to get up early, to move through her day with curiosity again. She wasn't just passing time anymore. She was using it. And then something beautiful happened. She decided to take a walk down to the small lake just outside of town. She had lived in the same house for over 30 years, and yet hadn't been to that lake in over a decade. Too busy, she used to say. But on that day, she made the time. She sat on the bench, felt the breeze, watched a couple of kids toss stones into the water, and felt peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you're finally paying attention to your own heart. While sitting there, she pulled the letter out of her pocket. She had started carrying it with her, not because she needed to reread it, but because it reminded her of who she really was. And as she sat there, she thought, what else have I been waiting to do? Now, Margaret wasn't trying to turn her life upside down. She wasn't suddenly selling her house and moving to Rome, though she smiled at the idea. No, she was just ready to reconnect, and part of that meant reaching out. So she made a phone call she'd been putting off for years. Her sister, Joanne, who she hadn't spoken to in ages, after a silly falling out neither of them really remembered the details of. The phone rang once, twice, and then Joanne answered. And just like that, the wall started to crumble. They cried. They laughed. They even made plans to meet for lunch, because sometimes healing starts with just showing up. Margaret also reached out to her church again, not just to attend a service, but to volunteer with their reading group. She had always loved stories, and helping others read brought a whole new sense of purpose. She felt useful again, not just busy, but genuinely needed. You see, when we talk about changing our lives, we often think it means doing something dramatic, but real change, it's made up of small, quiet choices, like picking up the phone, like sitting by the water, like saying yes to something that scares you a little. Margaret's courage wasn't loud, but it was steady. She didn't shout her changes to the world. She just lived them, and with every little step she took, something else started to shift. Her health. Not in a miraculous way. She still had her aches and slower mornings, but she found herself moving more, sleeping better, even smiling without trying. Joy has a funny way of showing up in your body when you finally stop ignoring what your spirit needs. And maybe you're listening to this thinking, that sounds wonderful, but I wouldn't even know where to start. Let me tell you a secret. You don't have to know. You just have to begin. Maybe you dig out an old hobby you forgot you loved. Maybe you write a letter to someone or to yourself. Maybe you take a different route on your daily walk or strike up a conversation with someone new. Whatever it is, let it be small enough to start, but meaningful enough to matter, because that's what Margaret did. And those little steps, they added up. Day by day, they became a new kind of rhythm, a new kind of life. It wasn't perfect. There were days she doubted herself, days she wondered if it was too late to be making these changes. But every time she felt that old tug of doubt, she'd whisper to herself, if not now, when? And if you're hearing this now, maybe it's time you whispered it to yourself too. What dream have you tucked away? What letter, literal or figurative, have you left unopened in the drawer of your heart? Because it's still there, waiting for you, not to do everything at once, but to start with one brave choice. Margaret's story is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you already are. That woman who once believed she could write, who wanted to learn new languages, who loved deeply and laughed freely. She never really left. She just got quiet. But now she's ready to speak again. And maybe, just maybe, you are too. It's funny, isn't it? How something as simple as a piece of paper, folded and forgotten for decades, can lead someone back to themselves. Margaret didn't expect her world to change in her 70s, but change doesn't ask for permission. Sometimes it just needs a crack in the routine to slip through. And for Margaret, that crack was the letter. As weeks turned into months, her days started to look different, not on the outside necessarily. She still had her morning tea, still read the paper, still called her daughter every Sunday. But on the inside, something had shifted. She began each day with intention. She smiled at strangers more. She stopped waiting for life to feel magical and started creating those moments herself. One morning, while sipping her tea, she reached for that little notebook she'd been writing in, the one she bought on a whim after reading the letter. Its pages were now half filled with thoughts, dreams, even little stories, and it hit her. She had become a writer, not the kind that sells books in stores or gives speeches, but the kind who writes because her soul feels lighter when she does. She smiled, realizing that her younger self wouldn't be disappointed at all. In fact, that girl would be proud, and maybe that's what this whole journey is really about. Becoming someone your younger self would be proud of, and your older self would thank you for. Margaret's days of playing small, of brushing off her needs and desires as selfish or unrealistic, were behind her now. She understood something many people never quite realize. It's not selfish to take up space in your own life. It's necessary. It's how you begin to glow from the inside out. One evening, Margaret stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She looked at her reflection, not with criticism, but curiosity. Her face, shaped by years of laughter and loss, still had so much softness. And her eyes, they were the same ones that had seen joy, sorrow, love, and everything in between. She leaned in closer, almost as if she were meeting herself for the first time. "You're still here," she whispered, "and we've got more living to do." That weekend, she took a trip to the coast with Anna, her new friend from Italian class. They booked a tiny room at a bed and breakfast that overlooked the sea. It wasn't the grand Italian coastline her younger self had imagined, but standing there, feeling the ocean breeze against her face, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I made it." Not everything needs to match the dream exactly for it to still be beautiful. And the best part? Margaret wasn't done dreaming. If anything, she was just getting started. You see, when you start living with intention, when you start saying yes to the little nudges and whispers from your soul, you become unstoppable. Not in the loud, fast way the world often celebrates, but in a gentle, rooted, unshakable kind of way. Margaret wrote another letter, but this time it wasn't to her past self, it was to her future self. She wrote about how proud she was for choosing herself, how grateful she felt for the simple pleasures, the morning sun on her face, the joy of learning something new, the unexpected friendships that made her laugh until her belly ached. She wrote about her fears too, but not with shame, with honesty. She admitted she still had days where she doubted, where the loneliness crept in, where old aches reminded her of the years gone by. But she also wrote this: "You didn't give up, you showed up, and that made all the difference." She sealed the letter and tucked it away in the same drawer where the first one had waited for her all those years. Because maybe one day someone else will find it. Maybe a daughter or a granddaughter, or maybe even a stranger will read those words and remember that it's never too late to start again. So let me ask you now, from one heart to another, what letter do you need to write? Maybe it's a letter to the version of you who gave up on a dream too soon. Maybe it's to someone you've lost touch with, or maybe it's to yourself, the beautiful, resilient, still growing you. Write it, or say it out loud, or simply think it. But don't ignore the part of you that's still reaching, still hoping, still believing. Life doesn't end when the kids move out, or when the job ends, or even when your body starts to slow down. Life ends when we stop listening to that quiet voice inside that says, There's more, and there is more. For you, for me, for all of us. So take the walk, make the call, sign up for the class, laugh out loud. Try something that makes you a little nervous, not because it guarantees a result, but because it brings you back to life. And if you ever forget who you are, just remember Margaret. Remember the letter, and remember that the most powerful changes come when you stop waiting and start living. You're not too old. It's not too late. And you're certainly not done yet. Here's to rediscovering the magic you've always had inside you. Here's to living your best life at any age. There's something special about stories that don't rush to their ending, the ones that take their time, like an old song you didn't know you remembered, quietly returning to you when you need it most. Margaret's story wasn't about a sudden transformation or a grand finale. It was about something softer, slower, a return, a remembering. The letter didn't promise her anything. It didn't come with instructions or guarantees. It didn't have bolded headlines or a list of goals. It simply reminded her, you're still here, and that was enough to begin again. It's easy to feel like the best years are behind us, like the spark we once had has somehow slipped through the cracks while we were busy taking care of everything and everyone else. But the truth is, that spark never left. It might be quiet, it might be buried under routines, regrets, or even grief, but it's still there. And when you begin to believe that, the world around you starts to change, too. Margaret noticed it in the smallest of ways. The neighbor who used to wave politely now stopped to chat. The barista at her local coffee shop remembered her name. She started getting postcards from Joanne again, funny ones, full of little jokes only sisters would understand. And perhaps most beautiful of all, her daughter called one evening and said, "Mom, you sound lighter lately, happier. What changed?" Margaret smiled into the phone and simply said, "I stopped waiting." She didn't explain the letter, the notebook, the seaside trip, or the little Italian phrases she'd started weaving into conversation. She didn't need to. Some things are too sacred to summarize. Instead, she just let her daughter hear the joy in her voice. The proof was right there. And that's what I hope you take from all this. Not that you need a letter, or a list, or even a plan, but that you realize it's never too late to surprise yourself. You can wake up one morning and decide to do something different. You can turn left instead of right. You can write the poem, take the walk, call the friend, or buy the book you've always wanted to read. You're allowed to begin again. In fact, you deserve to. And the people around you? They might not even realize how much they've missed this version of you. The one who smiles for no reason, who hums while doing the dishes, who has that sparkle in her eye that says, "I'm still curious," but they'll notice. Trust me, they will, because joy is contagious, especially when it comes from a place of quiet courage. Margaret's journey may have started with a letter, but it was really about giving herself permission to stop apologizing for wanting more, permission to take up space, permission to matter, even when the world sometimes forgets to look in her direction. And if you've ever felt invisible, or too old, or too tired, or too late, let this be your permission too. You don't need to travel across the world or climb a mountain to feel alive. You just need to say yes to your own heart, your own needs, your own dreams. That little voice that's been whispering to you, it hasn't given up, even if you've ignored it, even if you've said, not now, 100 times. It's still there, still waiting, still full of hope. So maybe today's the day you listen, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Maybe you dust off your journal and write something just for you. Maybe you try a new recipe, sign up for a class, start that puzzle you've been saving. Or maybe you sit quietly for a moment and just breathe and let yourself feel the life still pulsing in your chest. Because if Margaret's story teaches us anything, it's this: you are never too far from yourself to find your way back. You haven't missed your chance. You are the chance. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to rush, perform, or prove anything. You just have to start. Start with one small, loving act for yourself. And if you feel alone on this path, know that you're not. There are so many of us quietly waking up to the truth that age is not a deadline. It's a doorway to wisdom, grace, freedom, and yes, even new beginnings. So, wherever you are right now, sitting in your kitchen, lying in bed, walking in the garden, just pause for a moment. Let yourself smile because you are here, you are alive, and that means your story isn't over. It's unfolding beautifully, quietly, boldly, and maybe, just maybe, the letter you've been waiting for is this one. So if this touched you, if it stirred something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share your heart. Leave a comment. Reach out to someone. Tell a friend. Let them know you matter too. And if this story reminded you of someone who needs to hear it, pass it on. Because stories, like sparks, are meant to be shared. They light the way, one soul at a time. And as always, if this warmed your heart, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more stories that remind us what it means to live fully at every age.